Hi, this is Daria Polatin, and you're watching the TV Writer Podcast.
My name is Gray Jones, and I want to welcome you to the TV Writer Podcast, episode 134 for October 25th, 2022. Well, today I have the privilege of bringing you an interview with someone who is an award winning playwright, author, and accomplished TV showrunner and executive producer. Plus, she created and was the showrunner for the Netflix limited series Devil in Ohio, which debuted at #1 and ran in the Netflix Global Top 10 for 3 weeks. Welcome, Daria Polatin. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. And well, we will cover Devil in Ohio later in the interview. But first, I want to find out more about how you got to where you are today. I was really interested to see in your bio that you had already traveled to several continents when you were a kid growing up.
Yeah.
Talk about that experience.
So my father was born in Egypt.
Hmm.
And his family ended up moving. His sister moved to England. His uncle moved to Switzerland. His brother moved to Canada. And eventually my father moved to the United States. And so we had family in all these different places. So we grew up, going to visit them. But also my father was in the travel business, and my mother liked to travel. So we went to South America, Central America. I went to uh, East Asia with my mother when I was a couple times, but before I was 2 years old.
Wow.
And then so I just kind of we lived in India for a little while when I was a teenager. My father eventually retired to Costa Rica. I went to school in London for a while. My sister lives in London. So I just grew up with a very kind of international background, and loved traveling and different cultures and, food. um, so it's always kind of been in my blood a little bit.
I love how normally you speak about these things. Oh yeah, India and Costa Rica, like things that are so exotic to hear of us, to those of us here in North America. So.
I always was like, it's kind of weird growing
Mhm.
up, like traveling so much. But now looking back, I really appreciate that, those experiences, and that they were unique because they were normal to me.
Mhm.
So I appreciate that sort of, global perspective
Hmm.
becoming part of my world. So I'm grateful for those experiences.
Yeah, and your education spanned several continents as well. I mean, you completed residencies with London's Royal Court Theatre, Centre Theatre Group, the Echo Theatre. You earned your BFA from Boston University and MFA from Columbia University. Talk about all that time.
Yeah, so I grew up in Boston. I ended up going to college there. I studied theater at Boston University, where I actually went to school with Emily Deschanel,
Hmm.
who I worked with again in Dublin, Ohio. So we knew each other. I moved to New York. I studied at London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. And then I moved to New York, and I worked as a playwright, and I produced and wrote plays in a group called Ensemble Studio Theater, which was a group of emerging playwrights under 30.
Hmm.
And we just made stuff. We did down and dirty theater. We put it
Hmm.
up for $0. Lot of glory, had a blast, really fun, really scrappy
Yeah.
storytelling, and just like, we did an exercise where it was called asking for trouble.
Hmm.
And you picked your actors out of a hat. You picked like an object for your subject out of a hat, which could be like a song or like a physical object. And you had, 1 week to write the play, and they had 1 week to rehearse it and put it up. So
Wow.
we did fun stuff like that. And it's interesting, a lot of the people in that group are now TV writers out here. Liz Merriweather,
Hmm.
Dorothy Fortenberry, Jihan Crowther, Eli Clark, Annie Baker, Amy Herzog. Like it was pretty incredible artistic home that I found there.
Mm.
So that was really great, and it did kind of prepare me for TV writing a little bit in not being precious about things, because
Mm.
theater can be, on the precious side. You're spending a lot of time rehearsing something, and you really get time to dig into stuff. But like the way we did things was like fast and scrappy, and like if you couldn't find something, you figured out something else, and that's a little more how TV actually functions. It's
Yeah.
you got to be, thinking on your feet and pivoting and making adjustments and changing lines on the fly, whatever needs to be done. So it did prepare me for that.
Mm.
And then they produced one of my plays at the bigger stage there, and it did well. And I said, I think I should go to grad school and really study playwriting. So I went to Columbia and I did the grad playwriting program there.
Mm.
And while I was there, I ended up optioning a play to one of the Viacom teen networks. It was called the N Network. It's
Mm.
actually not around anymore. It's kind of before its time. It was like right before the YA boom, and they were trying to age up their Nickelodeon audience was like growing up, and they were trying to find stories for them, pre CW,
Mm-hmm.
and fill that kind of like young adult area. And so I wrote a pilot for them, and the company ended up folding, but it really piqued my interest in TV.
Mm.
And it was also a time in TV when there started to be a lot more stories that were dramedies, more character based. Some of the great HBO shows and
Mm-hmm.
Showtime shows were coming out then, and I was like, oh, I think I could actually do this. Whereas I had more grown up with like straight sitcoms and then procedural dramas, and
Mm-hmm.
neither of which I felt I really fit in as a writer. So it was writing the pilot really piqued my interest, and I thought I really gotta just come out to LA and give it a try. But I was really in New York, and I was really a New Yorker, and I was very embedded in the theater scene there. And so but I came out here and I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, and I, connected with friends who had started coming out here. And I
Yeah.
was like, this is amazing. Like, it's wonderful. Like,
Yeah.
really exciting storytelling. Like, TV at that time was, this was like 2010, 2011, like, was really starting to expand.
Mm-hmm.
Medium, and it was very exciting to be moving into something and sitting down with executives who were looking for new voices and new ideas. And while I still loved the theater at that time, post 2008 financial crash, like it was not an expanding medium. It was, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it was almost contracting a little bit. Those opportunities were there just was not very many of them. So TV really felt like an exciting place to be. So I moved out here, and I was a writer's assistant on
Mm-hmm.
Weeds, and then I was a script coordinator on Dexter. And by then I was like developing my own projects, and I got managers, and was starting to write pilots. And
And were
then
those were you able to use some of your plays as sample material, or were you already writing TV
yeah,
specs and pilots?
both, both. I'm trying to remember. I did have a play that I started out with that had, some kind of snappy TV type dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And character work. So it was a good fit for TV. Not every play is a sort of like a good fit for TV, although you're not always reading it for that. Sometimes
Mm.
you're reading just to get a sense of someone's voice, and it might not be a very TV, ready type of dialogue, but they're very inventive, or they have like some, a way with language that's really exciting. So there isn't only one way to have like a good playwriting sample. But then I know that I needed an original pilot. So I did have a spec. I had my Good Wife spec, which very quickly was not the spec whole interest dwindled. But it was a good exercise to, that's how I started writing specs of other shows, like watching them, absorbing them, getting my brain into them, and then, coming up with my own idea about them. And I think that helped me a lot. Once I did get on a staff, I had practiced that skill of going inside someone else's vision and helping to tell that story, because that's what your job is when you're on a staff. It's to help the showrunner tell their vision of a story.
So tell me how you landed that first staff gig.
I had a friend who was a writer on it, and she said, and I had come out to LA for a few months and just to like connect with people and take any meetings, and put the word out that I was looking for a writer's assistant job. Like I could have staffed too. Like obviously I wanted to staff, but I, thought it was a little bit easier entry point, to ask people for help getting a writer's assistant job. And I also knew that I wanted to be in the business for the long haul. And it's, I'd seen people come out here and get staff jobs and not really know how to manage them, or didn't really know how to function in the room. It's very, very different from, sitting by yourself and typing a play, so it's a very different process. So I wanted to also get my feet wet and learn how a room worked. So, actually my friend, had told me about it. I submitted a resume, and I was actually in Louisville, Kentucky. I had a short play at the Actors Theater of Louisville, Humana Festival, just a short play, and they called me, and it was like a Wednesday, and there was a snowstorm, and they called me at Weeds, and they said, "Oh, can you come in for an interview on Friday?" And I was like, "Yes, I can." And I was like, "Delta."
Yeah.
And I just, I was like, if you build it, I was like, I'm doing this. I'm here. And I got on a plane. I came out here. I slept on a friend's floor on a blow up mattress. Her downstairs neighbor came home at 2 a.m. and like blasted music. He worked in a restaurant, and it was like my worst night of sleep ever. But and I'm a person who likes my sleep, so it's like, but I just like stayed very focused. And so anyway, that's how I got my first job. It wasn't easy. It took a lot of networking and connecting with people just to get that job. And it's a very hard job. It's not an easy job at all. But I learned a lot. And then I did one season on that, and then I really wanted to be on a hour long. So I again, through a friend, heard about the script coordinator job at Dexter. I had done a little bit of script coordinating at Weeds, and so I did that. And that was like TV writing grad school. That was like, because they did two-page story areas, they did 12-page outlines, they did writers and then the scripts, and they did writer's draft, producer's draft, and studio network draft. It was Showtime, so it was the same. They just bundled those. But like, and I proofed everything over
Wow.
and over and over. So I really absorbed, the process of that probably really helped me, particularly like an outline
Mm-hmm.
phase, of the process, because I just soaked it up so much. So yeah, and then I did another I did another writer's assistant job for Moira Wally Beckett,
Mm-hmm.
who had just come off Breaking Bad, and I did worked on her show Flesh and Bone, um, which was wonderful, really small room, and it was other playwrights who I knew from New York, so it was a very
Oh.
friendly, a warm room for me
Mm-hmm.
to, not every room is it appropriate for a writer's assistant to speak up, but this one was, every once in a while when I had that really, really golden nugget idea and,
Mm-hmm.
the room was kind of stuck, I could, pitch that, and that was welcome in that situation. So that was a great step for me. And then the producer, Melissa Bernstein, who worked with Mark Johnson on Breaking Bad, and so I knew, through Moira,
Mm-hmm.
she was producing the show Shut Eye, and by that time so Flesh and Bone was going to maybe go another season, and I was getting staffed on it, and so that's how I got my agents. And then it didn't happen, and then the agents were like, okay, well, just write something, we need a new pilot from you, like, just give us a new piece of material. I was like, cool, no pressure. Like, everything rests on these 60 pages.
Yeah.
Like, I've gotten so far, and so I worked and finally got staffed on Shut Eye
Mm-hmm.
with that new piece. So it took me a long time to break in.
Yeah. So how
And
many years would you say that was between when you first arrived in LA and when you staffed on Shut Eye?
um, well, I first sold the TV show to uh, the Viacom network in 2007. Then I started coming out to LA in 2009 and 10, for a month or two. And then I moved out officially in 2011, and I staffed on Shut Eye in 2015.
You'd be surprised to hear that's actually relatively quick. I know lots of writers
Sure.
that are at least 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, I was a playwright since I was 21.
Mm-hmm.
So I was writing, and so it yeah, it took a lot of work, a lot of hustling, a lot of writing, a lot of meeting people, and just pushing myself harder and harder on the page, just to
Mm-hmm.
get what I knew I could do to get that on the page in
Yeah.
that sample. So yeah, and then once I started working, I haven't stopped. I just
Mm-hmm.
I just kept going, and I would just take, not take everything. Well, early in my career, I just said, yeah. I'm like, yes, I finished Shut Eye. I pushed very hard to try to get on Jack Ryan because I love that
Mm-hmm.
series. And then during the break on Jack Ryan, Paramount had another show called Heels at Stars. I was like, sign me up. I did Heels, and then I went back to Jack Ryan. Like, I just said yes. I just kept moving because I just wanted
Mm-hmm.
to, like, keep going.
Yeah.
So I did. So I've worked on about 12 shows or 12 seasons in 10 years,
Wow.
10, 11 years. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a lot.
That is a
I'm
lot. Well,
tired.
tell me about those first couple of rooms, like Shut Eye and Jack Ryan. What was it like to finally be on staff? And how were the rooms different? How did you find that time?
It was so exciting. Shut Eye was a very small room. It was just 5 writers and a really wonderful writer and journalist was our staff writer's assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like 3 EPs, it was Les Boheme, who's an incredible writer and been around, Greg Walker, who's an incredible writer and showrunner, Patty Breen, who wrote on Frasier, like it was all stars. And another wonderful writer named Tom Pabst. And because I had been in 3 rooms, I knew what to do, and I could swim instead of sink, because it was the big leap, like fast, and it was fast, and it was like to have the confidence to pitch and to get stuff in. That was like, it's like a moving, I don't know, train, and you gotta like stay on the train,
Yeah.
like so. So I was really grateful for my sort of training and learning and absorbing in the other rooms leading up to that. I don't know that I would have known what to do as well if I hadn't had those experiences. And I also always really paid attention in whatever room I was in, early on, like who was really landing their pitches and how were they, like everyone has their sort of own way of throwing an idea out, and I really kind of honed in on those people that I thought were kind of like my style, like, and I really tried to learn from them. And it feels a little awkward to start to this might be a bad idea, but let's just try, like when you start it, kind of
Yeah.
specific language that you kind of find. And but yeah, I just was like a sponge. I paid a lot of attention, and I listened a lot, and I would do my homework. I mean, I would go home, I would reread the notes for the day. I would do that the next morning before the room. But I would do research. I would look for articles. Like one of the things that's really helpful when you are a lower level writer is to come in with cool articles, a documentary that you found on this thing that we were talking about, this wild movie that is related to this character, this book that you read over the week, like to kind of bring that stuff in. It's a really great opportunity to bring things to the table, because at that level, you're just you just don't know how to, pitch out a whole arc in the way that the upper levels will know how to do that. And that's fine, and that's not your job. But where you can be, besides, contributing in the room, talking about story, is helpful with time, right? Because that's the other thing you might have that some of the upper level people don't have. The showrunner is working all day in the room, and then they leave the room, and then they're working all day and before and during lunch on all the other stuff they have to do. And probably the other EPs are, jumping on the phone about their other pilot at the network, at the studio. So what, as a staff writer, even writer's assistant, definitely as writer's assistant, story editor, executive story editor, like really bringing information in and cool stuff is so helpful and so valuable, and a really great way to contribute that no one's going to tell you to do, and but also is a great way to contribute. You're not stepping on anybody's toes, like it's really and it's really helpful for the rest of the room. Like it's like kind of filtering, because the thing that's the most valuable is time, right? Like we don't have enough time to read all the books and do all the, we do research, but like if someone can say, oh, this chapter of this book was amazing, like it's so helpful. So I did a lot of that, which worked well for me. So from Shut Eye, the other great thing about that was that I got to produce uh,
Mm.
up in we were in Vancouver, and Melissa Bernstein, who was the producer, she knew that I had worked in the theater for a long time and produced theater and knew how to be on set and in rehearsals and all of that. So she fought for me with the studio and the network to cover set. And I ended up covering 3 episodes as a staff writer.
Wow.
Yeah, because of course the EPs they want to be home with their family. They don't
Yeah.
they'll go up for a few days, but they have other stuff to do. But I was very happy to, stay in a hotel and go to
Yeah.
set and like work with different directors, and I loved it. And I didn't know how unique an experience it was
Hmm.
because the business has been changing so much. It's now very difficult to get set experience,
Yeah.
especially in the cable streaming world. And that show was for Hulu. So yeah, she had to fight for us to stay, and me and the Tom, the story editor at the time. But but no, we got to produce our episodes, and
Very cool.
covered some other ones. So that was really, really valuable.
Hmm.
Then working on Jack Ryan was a dream. I mean, I Lost was like made me like network TV,
Yeah.
like it was like so character driven, yet
Yeah.
still the plot was, whatever. Sometimes the polar bear maybe didn't satisfy everybody, but like it was so inventive and fun, and like the
Mm.
procedure of it was great. The storytelling was so amazing. So and I loved the Jack Ryan characters. I grew up, my father came from Egypt in the 60s and 70s, and was obsessed with like American movies. So I grew
Yeah.
up watching those old movies, um, and the American action heroes, and so I loved that, and I worked very hard to get that job. I did a lot of research, and I happened to also have the right sample, which was actually a play that corresponded with the storyline that they were looking at doing.
Mm.
So that worked very well. And I had some insight to another character that was helpful for that team, and that room was really great. It's every room is a little bit like special teams, right? Like you have we had like a ex-CIA analyst, we had a journalist, we had a guy who wrote for 24, we had an amazing British Bengali writer, we just had all these like people who had different experiences and
Mm.
brought that to the table. And so that was really exciting. It's really exciting when you're working on a show like before you get into production and before all the other elements come in, and it's just a group of writers and coming up with stories and writing scripts. It's so fun. So
Yeah.
hard work, really hard work, very rigorous storytelling. So that was another thing that I learned, from Carlton is, and Graham Rowland, who co-created it and is a good friend and incredible writer. Really thoroughly breaking those stories,
Mm.
breaking, like really getting those outlines, really solid, because it's Jenga, and
Mm.
once things will move in production for, of course, just because of production, so it's like really getting everything and kicking the tires on everything, vetting everything as much as possible in
Mm.
that process, because once the ball starts rolling on production, it is just crazy town. Like it's hectic. So,
Yeah.
and then you're having to adjust things because of production or an actor or something. So I'm a big proponent of very, very thoroughly breaking story and really making sure outlines are really, really rigorous and blueprint for the episode. You don't really have the luxury of like finding it on the page in TV. I know some people still do, particularly people who come from film, who are running shows and maybe haven't had that sort of TV, training of that. But then, and I've worked on some of those shows, and I know they're not thoroughly broken, but I'm like, all right, I'm here for 20 weeks, I'll rewrite on set, good luck to you. God be with you.
Yeah.
So everyone has their own process. My process leans toward what I learned from Carlton and that really rigorous breaking process.
Very cool. I do want to get to Devil in Ohio as quick as we can. So let's just maybe not skip over, but you had Castle Rock and Condor. You were a co-producer on Castle Rock and supervising producer on Condor, or how'd that work?
They're out of order because of when they actually came out. I did Jack Ryan, then I did Heels for Stars as an executive story editor, came back to Jack Ryan, did executive story editor. Then I did Condor as a supervising producer. I did Castle Rock as a co-executive producer, and then Hunters as a co-executive producer, and then Devil in Ohio.
Yeah. Very cool. So signpost at that time, what did you learn sort of at the higher levels? Now you're sort of starting to mentor people and that kind of thing.
It's interesting because your role kind of starts to shift when you get into the mid-level, and then you don't, and then upper level. Whereas at the lower level, you're kind of like pitching an idea or a scene or an element for a character. Once you're coming up to the mid and upper level, your job becomes more to synthesize the ideas and pitch out a sequence, pitch out an arc, combine that cool thing that staff writer said and the cool article that the writer's assistant brought in, and make some magic out of it. So you and that's how your muscles grow. I mean, I remember like kind of feeling those muscles working and growing as I kept progressing and again, really keeping an eye on ear on those people who are really good at it and learning from them and absorbing like, wow, how does he do that? How does he like some people pitch something in the room and everyone just is leaning in, it's like kind of just trying to learn what works well. So yeah, and then mentoring, reading other writers, the staff writers or story editors, or like if they have a script or if they want to like pitch out an idea before they bring it to the room, that becomes something to help with. But again, even at the upper levels, your job is still to help the showrunner tell their vision, and that also can become more challenging as you are upper level and you have your own stuff and you have your own ideas and you think, well, I wouldn't do that, I would do this. Sort of new challenges of like, okay, like where are those boundaries, where can you sort of give your honest opinion, and then where do you just kind of say, okay, this is your show, like let's go, we'll go with that, great, and just get on board, so it's interesting how it its own things come up.
Very cool. We're going to take a quick sponsor break, and then we'll be back to talk about Devil in Ohio. DrivingFootage.com provides 360-degree driving plates for film and TV. Over 14,000 clips are available for locations all around Southern California, with over 100 new cities from the US and Canada coming in 2023. A fully equipped camera car with height-adjustable rig is available for custom shoots. Visit DrivingFootage.com for details. AVGearGuy.com uses state-of-the-art technology to bring new life to old films and videos, like the Lost Betty White series, Pet Set, which they recently restored for its 50th anniversary. They can apply the same technology to your documentary, film and video archive, and family videos. Visit avgearguy.com for details. Full disclosure, I do own both of these companies. By supporting them, you help me bring new in-person videos to you. So now I want you to tell me all about Devil in Ohio. You wrote the book first. Tell me how the story came about.
So I had written a pilot about a cult. And one of the managers at the management company I was at, she wasn't my particular manager, came to me and she said, I have this story and you need to tell it and you should write it as a book. And I had actually ghostwritten 2 young adult novels out of grad school because I graduated from grad school with the degree in playwriting. And I said, okay, how do I eat? And I got a job ghostwriting for Alloy Entertainment. And I wrote 2 books for one of their New York Times bestselling series. So I had some experience in this young adult writing world. And so she told me this story. She says, this girl escaped from a satanic cult with a pentagram on her back and her psychiatrist takes her home. I was like, okay, well, I've got to tell this story. So, and it was, it's inspired by a true story. We've gone, it's fictionalized it's not a biopic or anything. So just to free ourselves up creatively. I wrote the book. I sold it off the first 100 pages and a pitch. I actually sold it right before I got Shut Eye because I was trying to get a
Shut Eye because that was a while back.
Yeah, 2015. And then I sold it and then I was like, I had to write the rest. And then I got really busy in TV. So I would write it on my lunch break in the morning, at night. So when I finally finished it, it came out in 2017. And we always knew we wanted to adapt it for screen and, get to kind of dig into the story more. And I actually originally sold the to UCP and the book. And really wonderful executive there, Nick Ziegler. Well, now he's become a writer in his own right. And then we took it out to networks, and Netflix was just the right fit. They just got it. The executive there, Lisa Hamilton Daly, who's wonderful and is not there anymore. But she just got the show, so it was very exciting. So Netflix ended up buying out UCP. As an active producer, and so the process, took years. I've sold it in 2018. It takes months to do the deal. We maybe started our first kickoff meeting in 2019, wrote a few versions of the pilot. There were regime changes meanwhile at Netflix. And, meanwhile, I just kept staffing and kept going. And then in 2020, actually, I had a baby. And then 2 months later, Netflix was like, okay, it's time. We're going to make your show. And I was like, what?
Good.
I had all this time for so many years. so I did it, in that way, the pandemic was probably helpful in that
Mm.
I could work from home and be close to my son. And but it was hard. I mean,
Mm.
I went into, I mean, just starting staffing. Like we read, me and Rachel Miller, became my manager and producer, 400 scripts
Oh my goodness.
for
Wow.
staffing. It was supposed to be 4 spots, and I pushed to get a fifth writer spot. And these were like pre-selected scripts. These
Wow.
were recommendations or through managers or agents, that were specifically for the show. So, but it was a lot. So that, was 2 months of reading and then meetings. And it immediately is like a ton of work.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
uh, it's yeah. So
Well,
so
tell me about, because this is the first time um, that you were in that role. What were you specifically looking for this show, and the people that you did land on? What was it that told you that they were the ones?
Yeah, great question. Sort of, I mean, I there were different aspects of each of the writers that I hired that felt, again, that's sort of the special teams.
Hmm.
Like our other EP, Andrew Wilder, had worked on procedurals for many years, on Criminal Minds and The Following and Secrets and Lies. And I really wanted someone who had that sort of broadcast rigorous, story breaking,
Hmm.
muscles, and who also had a good sense of, detective. I wanted to do the detective character, so I wanted somebody who was familiar with that kind of storytelling. So, that's what I was looking for, that he was really great for. Another writer is actually from Ohio and
Hmm.
grew up like in the evangelical church, and had really interesting experiences. And was also, he was in the playwriting world, and I had met him. He was a dramaturg, which is almost like a development exec uh,
Hmm.
in theater. I mean, basically, they help synthesize story, and they
Hmm.
help the playwright, like, um, uh, they also have a knowledge of theater history and stuff. But so he had a wonderful brain for looking at the arcs, looking at the themes,
Hmm.
looking at a lot of that bigger picture stuff. So again, I was kind of like seeing what was coming to me, but finding people who kind of covered a certain area
Hmm.
well. I guess in, reading scripts, what I'm looking for is, you read so many,
Hmm.
you just want to be engaged. And like you're the first few pages, like it's your sample uh is is an opportunity to show off your writing
Hmm.
and show off your voice. So, when I see like so and so walks into the room, well, I'm like, I'm bored. Do they hurry? Do they hurry into the room? Do they saunter into the room? Do they sulk into the room? Like, it's an opportunity. Like,
Hmm.
and so if I don't see that in the first few pages, it's hard for me to stay with something because I'm looking for that voice
Hmm.
on the page. Like you're, I'm not going to make your pie show. So like but I'm looking for voices to come, interesting and energetic, and you're looking for kind of like an energy on the page,
Hmm.
storytelling that's exciting, that's engaging. Um, And so that's really what I was looking for. And you can tell very quickly. It's and I think people, I don't know if they are maybe told to kind of like keep it simple on the page or not, be too flowery. And I'm not saying like, you know, like write like, highfalutin prose or anything. Just like what's your point of view? I want to see who the person is on the page and see their personality and hear their voice. I think and those are surprisingly few and far between. Even very accomplished people, like so that's what I look for. I mean, maybe other people look for different things, but when I'm on script 389, like it's like I want to I just want to be pulled into it and enjoy the read, the actual experience of reading it. I want to be engaged.
Yeah, very cool. So how was that room? Did you write scripts ahead of shooting, or were you shooting at the same time? And what was it like to run that room really for the first time?
Yeah. So most streaming now, you write everything and they let most of the writers go, unfortunately, and you try to fight to keep as many as you can, but often it's just one. But sometimes people don't. I knew ahead of time to ask for that, and because a showrunner friend had been like, make sure you get in the budget up front to keep someone on, at least one person. And so I did that, so that was built into our budget. But I have other friends who didn't build that into the budget, and then they're in production and they're having to do everything and they can't. And the studio then doesn't want to give it to them because it's not in the budget. Right. So anyway, I would have kept multiple people if I could, but it was also COVID. It was very, that you couldn't have like extra people around. But so we wrote everything up front. We had a very tight production schedule, extremely tight. So when I found that out, I said, okay, I'm going to give you all 8 episodes up front, and you're going to tell me anything. You got any problems, anything we can't shoot, to the line producer, and any creative issues, you tell me now, because when we start, this thing is like the biggest like clock ticking puzzle ever. And a lot of it was block shot. It was a block shot in terms of 2 episodes, but also by location. When you're on a short shoot, you don't go back multiple times to locations often. So everything for the church scene in the series all shot on one day.
Wow.
All the interiors.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like it was intense. So anyway, I delivered everything, all 8 episodes up front. Because I also wanted our production team to know where we're going. The show is there's a lot of Easter eggs and things woven in, and there's a lot going on. So I wanted them to know the whole scope. I wanted them to know where we're going, and that way the costume designer can really design a progression for a character. Jules goes from being kind of dowdy to like dressing cool better toward the end, Then in terms of running the room, I had been briefly, the Hunter's room had turned into a Zoom room. So I had a little bit of experience. That was a much bigger, there was a lot more people in that room, maybe 11 or 12 with everybody. And this we had the 6 writers, and I had our writer assistant, I had our script coordinator be in the room with us, and I had her run the board, which was like a Miro board. and I had my assistant also wanted to be a writer, include her in the room as well. So there were 9 of us. But it's the vocal real estate becomes even more precious
Yeah.
over Zoom, because really only 2 people can really kind of go back and forth, maybe a third voice, but it's very hard to have bigger conversations with a bigger group. So I developed a couple, having kind of had a little bit of experience in a room. Developed a couple of ideas for ways to make more real estate for people. And I would do like a round robin, so let's go around and everyone talk about, or everyone pitch your ideas for this. And so we really made sure we heard from everybody.
Yeah.
Because particularly the lower levels they'll go on mute, and then you don't hear from them and you don't hear their ideas, and sometimes there's great stuff. So I wanted to make space for them. And I also did breakout rooms. I very often would split us into 2 groups. So it was like, 3 people in a room, and with an assistant, and that way you could move more, you can cover more territory. So that was really helpful as well, to just break things down into smaller groups. But it's hard. Zoom is hard. It's doesn't. I would do things like on Fridays, like fun Friday activities, like I bring in like a sound bath person or a dance party person, try to do fun stuff
Yeah.
but again, we're all like sitting on our computers in addition to the others sitting on our computers that we all do. So it was challenging. And then, I mean, shooting in COVID in Canada at that time, it was like right around Delta, was brutal. We just, very great to have such strict protocols. Actually, we did not have one COVID case on set.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we were very, very rigorous. And supply chain was very difficult up there. You couldn't get anything. You couldn't get clothes, cars, food. It was really, really challenging. You couldn't cross the border to run to Target, it was really very difficult. It was a very difficult time to shoot. But
oh yeah, especially in Canada. I know one director who he would go down to shoot an episode, but he would have to quarantine for 2 weeks before he shot the episode. And if he would have alternating episodes, he just would stay there because he couldn't afford. Literally didn't have the time to quarantine again when he came back.
Totally. Yeah, we started right when that stopped. Luckily, we were planning for it, and then luckily they dropped that right when we started. But
wow.
We still, the cast, they actually, we only had 4 U.S. actors. Everyone else was local. So mostly everybody just came and, stayed put up there. But yeah, I love the writer's room. I miss the writer's room, looking ahead, I'd love to figure out some kind of hybrid situation, maybe meeting in person outdoors. I'm very COVID conscious, but maybe meeting outdoors for a month or 2 and just get the vibes going, and get some interpersonal stuff going, and then we can branch off more virtually. So it's going to be an ongoing process figuring out what that is and where people are comfortable with their health, and just going to be continuing to figure that out.
Yeah, very cool. Well, we're going to shift gears a little bit. I love at the end of your bio, it mentions that you are drawn to telling engaging stories that explore the complexities of the human condition. And you do this under your 1001 Pictures banner. Tell me about these stories that you want to tell going forward.
I love psychology. I love characters. I mean, I think from my playwriting background, I just love digging into characters, and I study a lot of psychology. And I love when the people are the monsters.
Mm,
Like that's our own minds and our own unconscious is a really interesting thing to explore. So I approach storytelling that way, and I've worked in a lot of different genres, and
mm,
it kind of doesn't matter the genre to me. It's about the characters, and that becomes their behavior. um, I think in terms of the landscape now, there's so much TV, which is wonderful
mm,
and exciting, and so much storytelling. I mean, it's so cool. But like the process of coming up with an idea, pitching it again, pitching it again, selling it, writing the outline, rewriting it, finally write the pilot. Okay, great. They pick up the show. Great. Okay. Then you produce the show. Okay, great. Then you do post for 8 months. Okay, great. Like you spend like years and years and years, like 2 to 5 years on a season, one
mm,
season of television. Now, if it gets renewed, whatever, it's more efficient. But so an idea for me has to really have a lot of depth to it, and
mm,
be something that I feel is going to still feel like fertile ground 3 years later. Like, and in 5 years, am I gonna be psyched about like doing a press tour? You
mm,
have to kind of really be that invested in an idea, and you have to be so into the idea that you convince other people to give you millions and millions of dollars for
yeah.
your idea. So like it's a big buy-in, and the first buy-in has to be you, the writer,
Mm,
creator. So I really take seriously the projects that I take on, because of the amount of work and the investment that you sacrifice time with your family, you work through the weekends, you work late, you get up early. Like it's a lot of sacrifice for these stories, and it
mm,
has to feel worth it in some way for me. I mean, the other thing is the why now has to feel important. Like, I don't do a lot on period shows, but like if it is a period show, like why are we telling it now? What Twitter, like we're on such like instant gratification, like very everything's right now, everything's happening right now. So
mm,
like why will people talk about your show? Like it has to be able to kind of cut through that for me,
mm.
and be a part of the conversation now. So or whatever now is going to be in 3 years, like it
Yeah.
has to feel relevant, and have some weight to it, for me to invest in.
Mm. Very, very cool. And you're also a founding member of the Kilroys, an advocacy group for gender parity in American theater. Talk about that, and also talk about the gender parity in television writing.
Yeah, great questions. The Kilroys started with a group of informally gathered female playwrighs, female and non-binary, and we were talking. There was a lot of talk in the theater about, they had done a report about how many plays produced were by women,
Mm.
uh, and the number was about 20% of
Wow.
all plays produced annually. At that time, it was early 2000 teens. I don't remember exactly. Um, and we it was a lot of there was a lot of complaining about it, and this group and we gathered in someone's living room. We were like, well, let's do something about it. What's the problem? Like, okay, artistic directors can't find plays by like great plays by female and non-binary writers. Well, why don't we make a list for them? And we got the nation's, best dramaturgs and artistic directors and directors, theater directors, to nominate their favorite plays, and then we'll just list the top portion, and then there we dump them, we place that list on the laps of the of the artistic directors of the big theaters, and there we go. So it really was a kind of trying to think of the word, like guerrilla move that we did, and we just figured it out. It was very, it's hard to run a collective of, I can't remember, maybe 13 people who all have their own, careers and things. But we just did it, we just figured it out, and we launched this list, and we launched it in the New York Times, and we got great press and a lot of advocacy, and then we'd also do things like we did like a cake drop, like honoring 10, 20 theaters across the country with a cake for their great record in producing new plays by female and non-binary writers. So we did stuff that was kind of subversive and out of the box and bold, and we had no it was just some donations. We didn't do a ton of fundraising. It was more, again, scrappy, oh, I have a friend who can, do this. Okay, I know a journalist over here. Okay, great. And we just figured it out. And so we did it about 5 years, and then we handed it off to a new group of playwrights to take the baton. We also published a couple of volumes of selections from the plays. I think maybe monologues. So it was a really wonderful way to kind of just participate in that conversation positively, and take some action very, very viscerally. And I'm very grateful for that experience, because it's brought a lot of great attention to a lot of wonderful writers. In terms of TV, I think it's better. I mean, it was the percentages of well, actually, my show was the first writing job. I'd been in a couple rooms with female showrunners as an assistant, but it was the first writing job with a female showrunner. Me. I have, in the other 7, 8 shows, all male showrunners.
Wow.
Yeah, and almost all majority male rooms. And mine was actually, was it? I can't even remember. Mine was more 4 women, 2 men. So that was the first room that was also majority female. So I know that's not the case for everybody, but maybe because of the shows I type, the sort of
Jack Ryan and
and then we're sort of more male heavy. But it's better. It's definitely better than the theater. Although maybe the theater is catching up a bit, hopefully. I think the next area is, to keep empowering female showrunners, like women in charge, because there might be a there might be some more equity in terms of the balance, but a lot of time they're lower level and they haven't, you know, like the pathways, haven't been as cleared for, lesser heard voices. A lot of times they're not as far in general in the pipeline. So then they're not the person who the studio calls because they know the person who's done it before, because they haven't gotten the opportunities yet. I mean, I had to advocate for myself to run my own show.
Wow.
Years and years and years and years of experience.
Wow.
You know, I didn't roll off the Apple truck, or, like, and I still had to have a conversation of like, I'm running the show. I know how to do this, and you need to let me do this. So it's there. In general, this might get me in trouble, but like in general, like I feel like maybe men tend to more get the benefit of the doubt, and women have to prove themselves to get something. I think there are studies about this as well. I know that there's been some studies around this. Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, a lot of the film, and then when you go into production, it's male dominated, and that's can be tricky too. It's a continuous exercise of balancing kindness and empathy and strength and fortitude.
Yeah, when I started this podcast in 2010, I did a special few episodes highlighting the situation of female writers at the time. And there was a study very much like what you referenced for playwriting, and the results were fairly similar in television writing. And I've seen it improve some over the last 12 years, but not enough. I have a daughter studying TV writing at USC now, and
cool.
I would love to see it improve more.
Yeah. It's the default in our culture. It's the unconscious bias that's, backed by 2,000 years of patriarchy. So it's I mean, yeah, it's just, I mean, look at our country and our world. Like, women are still fighting for basic rights. It's kind of crazy that is a thing, but it's still a thing. So yeah, I just try to do my part, and continuing to uplift voices and rally behind other women and do my best in my own little corner of the world.
Very cool. One question I always like to ask at the end is, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to someone who is just starting out and wants to be a TV writer? And in today's industry.
Yes. I would say the biggest thing is put your voice on the page. It's got to be on the page, in those, particularly right up front. Like, don't be afraid to have a voice, and your voice on the page. That's what I'm looking for, and I think a lot of people are looking for. Put you on the page. That's the trick. That's what girls, right? Like, those unique voices that are just like, wow, I want to know what your brain is thinking, like, so wherever, whoever you are, like putting that on the page, because that's what makes you special and unique. Um, Super practical things. I
Mm.
get a lot of scripts with no contact info on the front
Oh my.
and no resume or bio. Like if anyone asks for your script, always send your resume or bio. Like that, those two should always go together,
Mm.
because again, it's who you are. People are looking for who you are, not just like your writing, and you are part of the product. Like you are the thing. And so lean into that.
Mm.
So that I think is the most important thing, is getting you on the page right up front.
Mm. Very helpful advice. Very helpful advice. So just to wrap it up, social media contacts. Do you have a Twitter? Do you have an Instagram?
Yes, I'm on Twitter, Daria Polatin. I'm on Instagram, Daria Polatin. I'm still on the Facebook. I'm gonna phase that out. I do have an author profile on there. But yeah, Twitter and Instagram are my chosen drugs of choice. I don't know what you call.
Very cool. And I'll have links for those in the show notes. Daria, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. This has been wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for the episode. You can find us on the web at tvwriterpodcast.com or at scriptmag.com. The video version of this podcast is available at iTunes, Podbean, or YouTube. The audio-only version is available at iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, or Pandora. You can find me on Instagram at @tvwriterpodcast. Follow me on Twitter, @GrayJones is my handle. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.